to the point where we really need to write a program now. We need to get our program started because the next thing that I want to do is to introduce the function that's going to test our verse function, and I'm going to call that test underscore verse for reasons that we'll get to. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to actually create our program here. Let's see, clear this up. So inside the bottles of beer directory, I need to call new py. The program is supposed to be called bottles.py, and that will create our new bottles of beer. Going to change the purpose here. Actually, let's run this. I'm gonna run it as new py. I'm going to say that the purpose of this is the bottles of beer song, so I don't have to type that. And I'm going to force that to overwrite the bottles. Here we go. So that updates our bottles of beer song. I don't need a positional argument or a string argument for this. I'm only going to need the optional integer argument. So I'm going to change this to, I think it's called num. This will be the number of verses to sing. The metavar I'm going to make into number. I could call it verses, I could call it bottles. Here I'm going to say 10 is going to be the default, and it's going to be an integer. I don't need these other types of arguments, so I will just get rid of them. That handles a lot of the specifications for the inputs. The only other thing is that this is, we still need to check that it's not below 0. So I'm going to intercept my arguments here, and then I'm going to make sure I say return args. And then the whole idea is so I can say if args.num is less than 1, then I want to be able to call parser error. And I think that the string needs to be something like num, and then I always like to let the user know what the value is, args num. And I believe that the error needs to be something like must be greater than 0. I believe that's what it should be. Let's see, let's go to the terminal. What I want is to go into the 11. And let's just run, I always like to run the program. Let's just start off by, say, printing args.num. It's always a good place to start. If we run it with nothing, it should print 10. If I run it with -n, a 4, it prints 4. Let's see how we are with our test so far. Great. So as usual, the first test is that we have the program that exists by the right name, that it responds to usage. Here I always like to give you bad integer values to make sure that you're testing for that. Here I'm giving you a floating point value. Here I'm giving you a string value. I want to make sure that for sure you have handled all the cases of bad inputs. So now we know we have a valid integer value that we can use to sing our song. And the test that's failing is it's expecting the first bottle, it's passing in args num is equal to 1, and it's expecting 1 bottle of beer down to no bottles of beer. So it's not getting that, it's just getting 1. So it's a little difficult to learn how to read this, but it's asserting that 1, which is the output from the program, is equal to what's expected, and what's expected is all of this, and that's not the case. It got -1, it expected these lines of output. So we need to figure out how to make that work. We've already discussed, I showed you how we were going to write some sort of a verse function. So let's see how to define that. I like these little separators in my code to help me visually see between the different functions. You don't need to copy them if you don't like them. So I showed you that we can define a function to sing a verse by saying def, verse is the name of the function, and it's going to take some parameter or not. Here I called mine bottle. And the doc string is sing a verse. Just one verse. And I suggested that we would start off by returning the empty string. Let's start off here by just returning the bottle. That's going to be an integer, so let's just return a string version of the bottle. And instead of printing args num, we're going to print verse of args num. Let's just see if that actually makes sense, if we can run this. So if we run this with bottles, it still prints 10. So that is getting to the idea of how we're going to use this verse function, that we're going to use it to generate a verse of the song. Here is the test that I'd like you to think about using. Let's see if I can copy and paste this into my program. I usually, when I'm writing my own code, I like to define a function, and then I usually like to put the test for it immediately afterwards. Let's see. Just been learning how to do formatting of code. Let's see. I'm going to take these. I need to see if I can indent all these lines. Great. And then this needs to be indented. And then I'm going to see if I can find the option for formatting the code. Perfect. In VS Code, I was able to find the key combination to format this code. And again, I like these little separators in my code to help me see where the functions are. And so I like to define my function and then the test for it immediately afterwards. So here's the verse. It's going to sing a bottle. And here's the test for the verse. It's going to call that verse with some value like 1. And here I'm going to write my own assert statement here that I'm asserting that 1, the value returned by singing verse 1, is equal to these lines joined on the new line. So for the verse 1, for 1 bottle of beer, it should sing 1 bottle of beer on the wall, 1 bottle of beer, take 1 down, pass it around, no more bottles of beer on the wall. That's going to be the last verse of the song. So, and when we have 2, it's not going to sing verse 2 and then verse 1. Verse 2 is supposed to just generate 2 bottles of beer on the wall, 2 bottles of beer, take 1 down, pass it around, 1 bottle of beer on the wall. So that's the only thing that function should return. And right now, it doesn't do that. It's only going to return the string of the bottle. Now, the point of this, what is the point of this, is so that we can use PyTest. So I'm showing you how when you're writing your code, you can start writing your own functions and tests for them. And the way we use this is to call PyTest on bottles itself. PyTest will look for any function that starts with test underscore. So that's why this is called test underscore verse. It's testing the verse function. The only thing that's important here is test underscore. It could be test underscore 1. That's the only thing that PyTest cares about, is how it starts. For myself, I know that I like to put the function name after test underscore. So when I see this run, I want to see that it's what functions it's testing. Test 01 wouldn't really make much sense to me. When we run this, we see that there's a failure here, and it's not showing me as much output as I want because I didn't run it with the -v option. Let me run that again. -v bottles, and here I can see that it's running test verse and it's failing. Without the -v version, it just showed me that there was a failure there, which is I need to see what's failing. It shows me test verse is failing, and then it shows me specifically here that it's asserting that 1, that this value here, which is what it got back from calling verse 1, it should be equal to this string, but it's not. Then this looks exactly like the integration test that I'm providing with test.py. And so you're going to see here that there becomes to be this overlap between what we're doing in the unit test and what we're going to do with the integration test, and so sometimes the thing that you're testing really belongs as a unit test. So what we've got here is a unit test, and I'm stressing here that what I want you to think about is how you can write this function so that it passes this test. And if you can pass the test for the last verse, which is when you sing verse 1 bottle of beer, that's the last verse of the song. So if you can pass that one, where you have to say 1 bottle, and then no more bottles, and then if you can pass one where it's greater than 1, so any number greater than 1, so 2, you can make this 3, it should say 3 bottles, 2 bottles. Actually, 2 is the best one because it should be 2 bottles, but then 1 bottle. You want to make sure you get that that agreement there between the number and singular and plural. So if you can pass these 2 tests, you should be able to generate the entire song. Those are really the only 2 that you need to worry about. We've already verified in the parsing of the arguments that the number is greater than 1. Or greater than, yes, it's that it's not less than 1. So we've already validated that we have a good value that we can sing, and now we just have to figure out how to sing each individual verse and then put them together. And so that's what I'd like you to think about, writing this one function to produce one verse of the song.